Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ethan of Pixel Adventure Commentaries here with a quick disclaimer. You can tell that my microphone is very close to my mouth because I have no idea what is currently going on with it at the moment, and I didn't realize that before recording today's episode of Loki. So, throughout the entire recording, my microphone was kind of away from my mouth, and you can hear that in post because Bryan is significantly louder than I am. So I couldn't really do anything in editing to help mitigate that mistake either. So I just want to say to you, audience members, I apologize for the crappy audio quality of my microphone today. I am very quiet. Bryan is very loud. You'll just have to find some sort of balance within your own volume settings to make today's episode durable and durable today, rather, to listen to today. With that said, promise I'll have this microphone issue solved by the beginning of next week's before we start the audio recording podcast. And so please subscribe to our channel today, and please try to enjoy today's episode. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I am Ethan.
And I am Bryan.
And welcome to the Loki Season 1, Episode 2 podcast. Emphasizing Season 1 because the show is slated for a second season. And before we begin, we'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel today, please, so you can keep up to date with all of our Loki Season 1 review and synopsis podcasts. And also make sure before you listen to our podcast that you come in and watch Loki on streaming every Wednesday on Disney Plus before coming here and listening to our podcast, because we'll be discussing spoiler heavy content, especially this early on. Episode 2 kind of dropped some truth bombs on us, to to put it at the very least. It is very spoiler heavy in this episode already. It's like the climax already happened. But so make sure you go watch the episode before coming here. You have anything more to add to that, Bryan?
No, you summed it up really, really nice. I guess all I would say is just reiterate the fact of highly recommending it. That if you haven't seen the episode, go and watch it before you come here. We will wait. Alrighty, welcome back. So yeah. This is Season 1, Episode 2. What's it called again? The Variant. That's what it's called.
Yeah, the Variant, because we meet thy variant today. That was your fourth spoiler. All right, let's get into this thing.
Alrighty. So, well, unlike the other shows where they would usually begin right where the last episode left off, this one kind of does. It starts off in the most unseeming of places, mainly Wisconsin.
Right.
It starts off in Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Yeah, as soon as you see, like, after the whole previously on stuff, and then it finally gets into the episode, it's funny how they do it, because, like, you see all this medieval Renaissance things, and you're like, we're going to be in the 1500s, right? And then it says Wisconsin. Then you're like, wait a minute, Wisconsin was not a thing in 1500s. Then in 1985, oh, I see.
Oh, it's a Renaissance fair.
Mid-80s cosplay gang.
Mid-80s Renaissance fairs, because those were all the rage. But yeah, so we start in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, in 1985, where we see a small team of Minutemen trying to go after, well, the variant. Obviously, this variant isn't Loki. It's a Loki, but it's not the Loki.
Right. It was the previously aforementioned in the previous episode. I was like, well, of course I know him. He's me.
He's me. Yes, the Loki in the cloak,
Right.
cloaky, if you will.
Oh. Can we canonize that until we get to the reveal?
Can we canonize Cloaky? Can we get that trending? Just hashtag Cloaky.
Hashtag Cloaky. Anyways.
It's better than the name they have for that character already. So I mean,
Bro, I wish.
I'll get to that when we get there.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Alrighty. So yeah. So they follow Cloaky to a Renaissance fair in 1985. And they follow the variant into a what seems to be I want to say like a circus tent or something. Not necessarily a circus tent, but
I don't know how else to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's I think they described it as like a theater tent. Or like a theater center. So I think that what I think that implies is that this is where the like Renaissance shows and stuff happen.
Right.
Because I mean, we like later on in the scene, we see some like jousting equipment. So maybe this is where they have like the night shows and stuff.
Right.
Night is in like knights in shining armor. So yeah, so we see this small group of Minutemen. Again, there's only 3 of them. Oh no, I'm sorry, 4. There's 4 of them. As the variant begins their attack.
Loki.
Huh?
Loki.
Cloaky. As Cloaky begins their attack, Cloaky uses some form of enchantment magic, as it's referred to later on, to take control of one of the Minutemen and make her attack her fellow Minutemen teammates, snapping the neck of one of them.
I need a hero.
Oh,
I'm holding on to a hero.
I forgot that was the song. No, seriously. Okay, so when I was watching this episode and I saw that when this song came on, I legit thought in my head, I was just like, "Damn it, we can't sing that because copyright."
Well,
I was like, "This is the copyright scene."
As long as they don't hear the instrumentation, I think we're fine.
As long as the instruments are nowhere to be found, we're fine. The Minutemen are taken out by Cloaky and the enchanted Minutemen soldier. The Cloaky then takes, what the MO of Cloaky is so far, takes the reset charge, and this time takes the Minutemen soldier that Cloaky enchanted. And then that leads us into the title card. So after that wonderful and theatrical opening, we then cut to the inside of the TVA with Loki reading a jet ski magazine whilst getting taught lessons on field work from Miss Minutes, which I did not expect to get this much Miss Minutes in this show. And during this whole little snippet of his interaction with Miss Minutes, we're basically just taught, hey, like, here's how field work works. Don't let variants do this. And so we learn what happens when a Nexus event occurs. And a Nexus event is... so in the first episode, they kind of hinted towards what a Nexus event is, but in this episode, they kind of explained it a bit more. Basically, when a timeline divergent from the sacred timeline occurs, if it goes past the red line, aka a Nexus event, basically what happens when that occurs is that is the point of no return. Once a timeline reaches a nexus point, the TVA can no longer reset it. So Loki is told by Mobius. Oh, so I did some research on Mobius, and in doing so, I learned a lot more about the TVA.
Cool. Yeah, we kind of did not
Uh,
elaborate that
do you want me to?
last time because Brian, our big number one Marvel fan here, did not actually know anything about the TVA.
No.
So,
So I did some research,
mhm.
and when I say that, I mean I looked it up during work today. Um, basically, so in my research, I looked up Mobius's character. I looked up the TVA, and so Mobius's real name, his full name is Mobius, or Mobius M. Mobius.
Good job.
I know,
I hate comic books.
very creative name. However, it does kind of make sense why he would be named that because I'm pretty sure other characters are similar to that. Well, Mobius, and now again, this is only the second episode, and so there's a lot more that the show could introduce and build off of. So what I'm saying here is just comic book storylines, not necessarily the MCU and what they're gonna do. But in the comics, Mobius is a clone. In fact, a bunch of workers, and when I say a bunch, I mean almost everybody at TVA, is a clone of someone else. That's why they're able to essentially live forever, of sorts. Is basically when a TVA member is close to death or getting up there in age, they are cloned, and then that clone takes over from where that one left off. Um, and so Mobius is a clone of one of the most well known and smartest TVA judges that there is. I can't remember the name of the person right off the top of my head, but they are basically second in command to the time wizards.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, the TVA doesn't stray too much from its comic book counterpart. Going through time, tracking down variants, making sure the timeline doesn't get too out of whack. That has basically stayed the same. But the TVA, well, there's not really much to add about it, other than the fact that it was created by three time wizards, one of which happens to be the King the Conqueror, which may or may not become important later on in this show. But yeah, in this, again, I can't say that cloning is going on. But this Mobius, because it is Owen Wilson, is definitely more comedic than his comic counterpart.
Mm-hmm.
His comic counterpart is definitely a lot more stern and perceptive than this one is. I mean, not to say that this one is like stupid or anything,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it is Owen Wilson.
Yeah, I was gonna mention later in the episode that like there's a certain key moment where the audience gets the idea of like Owen Wilson. I like how we've canonized that. We just call him Wilson now instead of Mobius. But Wilson, his character is definitely a lot smarter than what he looks like.
So yeah, that's really it on Mobius.
Any
Yeah.
any other interesting details that might be handy for backstory knowledge on the comic books?
For backstory, I can't really say backstory, but I mean, the TVA could it. So remember how back in Captain America and Winter Soldier,
Just call it the Black People Show. God damn it!
back during that, um, you remember how I mentioned how Madripoor could have potentially been like a reference to mutants.
Yeah, I do recall that.
Yeah, well, in this, the TVA could potentially be a reference or a leading point to the Fantastic Four, because I mean, the Fantastic Four is on is on Marvel's to do list, um,
Hmm.
but the TVA and the Fantastic Four have had many run-ins with each other. There are a lot of Fantastic Four stories where they encounter the TVA, mostly because Reed Richards and his son are trying to do something that fucks up the timeline. Sorry, messes up the timeline. Um, and the TVA just has to come in and be like, listen, you get one more chance. If you screw it up, we're going to prune you.
Gotcha.
They never get pruned, by the way.
Ah.
Um, so yeah, um, that's really all I can think of right now. That is relevant to the show, at least. And yeah,
Alrighty. Well, thank you for that history lesson, Brian.
you're
All
welcome.
right. Let us move on now with the plot. So.
Yes. So we are given after Loki is told about the attack, we are then taken to a briefing for a team of Minutemen, including Loki and Mobius, who are on their way to go investigate and reset the crime scene. And here we kind of get to see a little bit of Loki having a superiority complex with there possibly being another Loki.
Okay. I wasn't sure what that was. Cause like that,
Um,
it's like it's not
yeah,
that feeling just isn't present in this scene right now. It's present throughout this entire episode at the least until the very end. And
yeah, it is. But this is where we get to see the start of it.
okay, I'll bring it up later when it's brought into like the main focus.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, no, there we see a little bit of a superiority complex take effect in Loki, with there possibly being another Loki. And then we get some banter between the head Minuteman soldier and Loki of them just witty remarks back and forth. Now I do want to talk about these variations of Loki that are shown. During the briefing, Mobius shows holographic images of variations of Loki from across the different timelines, just as a reference for who they could potentially be meeting or trying to look for. The first variation is one that we've seen, kind of, that being Frost Giant Loki, where obviously in that timeline he wasn't adopted, or well, he probably was, but he kept his frost giantness. But the one that I specifically want to talk about, because there's a soccer one, is I do want to talk about this Hulk Loki.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
they're very much so. There have been many variations of all the characters that we know and love, and almost every character at some point has been Hulkified.
Oh no.
That includes Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow, Hawkeye, like any character you can think of at some point in some form or another of media, like whether it be comic book, TV show, whatever. At some point, every character has been Hulkified, and yes, that includes Loki.
Ugh. Of course.
Gotta love comic
Oh
books, man.
man, comic books are so stupid. We finally do get to the back to the Renaissance Fair in Wisconsin, 1985, where the
Yes.
where the Minutemen as well as Loki and Wilson, they finally make their way to the circus tent and to the crime scene area, if you would, to begin their
Mm-hmm.
investigation.
So Loki actually, so on their way to the crime scene, Loki does ask the question, which I think a lot of us would be asking, is why don't the Minutemen and everyone just go back to right before the attack happened, and then stop it from there? And they explained that by doing that, that would just make the Nexus event even worse than it already is. Because, I mean, they're already not supposed to be there in the first place. So just it's basically just squaring the problem.
Right, and yeah, it's important to establish your rules for time travel and stuff, because if they were to follow that logic of going before the things, you remember that one SpongeBob episode, Back to the Past, where SpongeBob and Patrick by the end of the episode were just kept reappearing in that time machine over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it basically the rules have ended up like that if they had gone that route.
Yep. Which I was actually thinking about this earlier today. For one, I do actually like the time travel in this show. I think it's very well established, at least so far. It could potentially get confusing, but
Again, time travel storylines are not consistent because A, it's not a real thing, and two, we don't really know the rules for how realistic time travel would work, and so trying to create a consistency amongst the rules that you set up is very difficult.
Again, this is like the third variation of time travel we have seen in the MCU. And so, yeah. Another thing that I realized over this past week, after I thought about that first episode, is that so in the first episode, Loki escaping was not supposed to happen, and like the Avengers were supposed to get the Tesseract back in 2012 in order to complete their time heist, according to the sacred timeline. That means that Captain America and Iron Man going back to the 70s to the old Shield base to grab the Tesseract from Howard Stark wasn't supposed to happen. Again, time travel's weird. Because according to the show, that's what happened. That they weren't supposed to go back to the 70s.
Yeah, that. Oh no. Oh no.
Oh no, I'm finding plot holes. Kevin Feige, don't.
That does bring up some interesting questions, to say the least.
It does. Like, why didn't they get involved when the Avengers went back to the 70s? Because that wasn't part of the sacred timeline.
Yeah. Right. Because. Okay, if I had to pull
it just raises too many questions.
If I had to pull a fast one, the Avengers from 2023, when they did the time heist back in 2012, were always meant to lose the Tesseract, so they would grab the Tesseract from the 1970s. It's just one detail of the 2012 Loki grabbing the Tesseract as it flies out of 2023 Stark's hand was not supposed to happen. Like 2023 Stark losing the Tesseract was supposed to happen, but the 2012 Loki grabbing the Tesseract was not supposed to happen. If I had to put a fast one on that, that does raise an interesting question on how the timeline would work consistently, especially since we have like a million bajillion different writers creating the MCU. There's not going to be such a thing as consistency.
Consistency, what's that?
Yeah, so just I guess we'll just take this with a grain of salt until Kevin Feige himself can confirm this sort of plot line sometime after the show, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, we get back to the investigation inside the circus/theater tent, where we see I wrote down in my notes we're sort of seeing like Detective Loki here.
Kind of. Well, I mean, yes, he does put on the whole like detective thing and is like, hey, you go out there, you'll die and things like that. And then like he does this whole like pseudo Sherlock Holmes thing where he brings up a legend from Asgard and stuff. Very convincing work done by Loki. Until you realize that he's honestly just stalling.
Right.
Because they constantly are talking about how they need to set down a reset charge because they're getting close to the red line. Loki. So Loki right now, I'm just going to get through Loki's objective right now because they kind of introduce it a little bit before they go back to 85. Loki wants to seize control of the TVA and basically take the Time Wizard's power from them. That's what Loki wants. Because again, this is 2012 Loki. This is villain mindset Loki. Loki that wants to take over Midgard. This is that Loki. This isn't Loki who did a redemption arc, did the whole get help bit with Thor. This is not that Loki. This is, hey, let's take over the world.
Right.
And so he does that. They do that honestly pretty well, I want to say, of writing him as 2012 Loki, even though again that was like 9 years ago.
Right. Holy shit, that was 9 years ago.
And so
God
yeah,
damn.
no, 9 years, man.
I saw that movie in theaters. Dear God.
I saw that opening day in theaters, and I remember coming out of the theater, and there was a line of people waiting to go see the next showing of it.
Oh my God. Holy
shit. So yeah. So Loki is just stalling the reset charge because again he wants to meet the Time Wizards as soon as possible, and so he thinks that if he creates a next event, maybe that'll make him see him. And so they eventually realize that he's stalling and just put down a reset charge and get the hell out of there.
Right, and just a little backtracking here before they go back to the TV and everything. So this character this character moment of this quote Detective Loki, where he's really just stalling for time. I think this is where the show kind of wants to introduce the more elusiveness and shadiness of Loki's character in this scene as well. It's like after this moment and throughout the entire episode, I didn't know what to make of Loki's dialogue in the sense that what his character is he currently lying to the people he interacts with or the audience as well, just as his dialogue. It's a bit vague how I'm saying this. I recognize that, but I guess
you can't really tell when he's lying and when he's telling the truth.
Right.
Yes, and so, I do actually like that. Never see it's interesting having what would be an antagonist be your protagonist, especially in the case of Loki. Because he is very much an elusive character and a character where you never truly know what he's thinking or what he's trying to do.
Right. Which is why like later in the episode I'm like confused as to what his objective is. Like I'm aware that his objective is to gain access to meeting with the timekeepers so he can overthrow them, all that. But like in the specific moments, because that's the overall objective. But what is the objective of the scene right then and there? I am very unsure of what he is trying to do in specific scenes. Like I'll mention it now. There's a scene kind of after the. Actually, no, I won't mention it now because it's like right after this.
Yeah, no, we're like 2 scenes away from it.
Yeah,
so.
Never mind then. Let's go back to. What's her name? The sexual tension character that you said from last.
Yes. So they are able to reset the timeline and stop the Nexus event from happening, and then that is when we cut to Mobius and the judge from the last episode, which her name is
Judge Ravonna.
Yes. So Ravonna and Mobius are now talking in Ravonna's office. Which Ravonna has she has almost a trophy collection, if you will, of just like souvenirs and stuff that her analysts have brought her over the years, leaving for some more wonderful sexual tension between the two.
Okay.
Again, you can notice the first, like literally, like the first line is, "Where'd you get that? Where'd you get that one? The snow globe. I don't remember getting you that. You're not the only analyst who works for me."
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so they have a conversation about how bad of an idea it is to have Loki as a teammate. Um, which I mean, I can kind of see both sides, like how both sides of this conversation of this debate would be right. Because I mean, on one hand, it's Loki. I
And
mean,
like here,
he
it was like to sum it up. Ravonna's like, "Come on, it's Loki. What are you talking about?" And then Wilson's like, "Yes, I know it's Loki."
but
But
but we need him to catch Cloaky.
ah,
Because I mean, if they're the same person, maybe one can lead to the other. You know, 1 + 1 = 2.
and then she's like, "Yeah, one evil plus one evil equals two evil."
Yeah, but what if one of them's not that evil? It balances out.
It's like a
Um,
positive and a positive make a negative. A negative and a negative don't make a positive.
exactly.
I know that's not how math works, but
So that's basically the gist of their conversation.
then we cut to the outside and Loki. Okay, this is where I'm confused with Loki's character right now, because as soon as Wilson exits out of Ravonna's office, that's when Loki is like it's sort of like a doctor's waiting room, and it's like a small child waiting for their parent to get out, and then they're just so
Yeah, no, he is
happy.
very energetic during
Right,
this.
it's like a little kid, energetic type energy, where he's like, "Oh, yes," like he's bouncing all up and down the halls and all that, and stuff like that. It is super weird, and like his dialogue here, he is what he is saying he was trying to figure out some sort of excuse for the shenanigans that he pulled on the investigation that they just did in
Yes,
1985.
he's in a way trying to defend himself and bring back the trustworthiness that he, because in the moment at the end of the in the end of the crime scene, you could tell that Mobius pretty much lost almost all trust he had in Loki. And so the way that I see it is, this is Loki trying to manipulate Mobius, possibly by to get him back up to that trust point that they were at. And I think that's what a majority of this episode is. Because like the gist of this episode is a lot of them looking through files.
Right.
Spoiler, but it's the truth.
Right. Well, you would have seen the episode already, viewer. If you haven't, though.
Yes. And so Loki is basically like, hey, I have an excuse. Um, that was a teaching moment for you guys.
Yeah,
That wasn't me totally trying to ruin the fabric of reality as we know it. That was just me trying to teach you guys on how to catch a Loki.
right. Which I think we can all tell that is just garbage of what he was saying, and I think that's what
Oh,
what
yes.
I'm saying too. Is like the dialogue of what he's saying. He's trying to make some sort of excuse, but the content of what he is saying is not. Well, like what he's saying is not relevant to what his objective is right now. It's just throwaway dialogue, basically. And so that is like why I think they are very much alluding to the shadiness of his character, and that's why I'm always questioning like whether or not Loki is currently lying to us in the moment, or if he is not lying to us moment. Because this was a scene I was super confused with. I didn't know what the motivations or the objectives between Loki and Wilson were. I didn't know what Wilson's uh objective here was either. So if it is what you're saying, Brian, of what's Loki's trying to regain that sort of trust bond that they had, but I'm not sure if they even had that to begin with. Um, I just don't know. I am super lost. And another thing I want to ask you, Brian, because I remember last week we talked about um, Wilson's character trying to find like his objective in by showing him the PowerPoint presentation of his life. Um, as like he was trying to figure out what makes Loki tick, but then Wilson explicitly says a line that says, "I don't care what makes you tick." I don't know
Yeah.
what exactly that's supposed to mean, and I don't know what you feel about that, Brian, because that was pretty much your
So
entire basis last week.
so it seems that from what this episode is doing, it does seem that it does kind of make sense that Mobius does say, "I don't care what makes you tick," because it's it's not the tick that they're trying to find. It's what they're trying to figure out about Clokey is they're trying to figure out how to find them, how to find and possibly catch the variant. That is what they're trying to do. It doesn't matter what the tick is or what the inside of the mind is or whatever. It's just all about possibly getting a variant of that person's perspective on where they could potentially be hiding. Which, I mean, later on in the episode, that actually does come to fruition. Because Loki is the one to find out where Clokey could potentially be hiding. But we will get there when we get there. So I don't know if you can get like a screenshot of this or something to put over the to put into the podcast. But I just want to talk this like camera angle for the elevator.
The
Um,
long elevator.
yeah, the long elevator shaft. Um, that image, just at least to me, is very trippy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I saw something on the internets, the instas of like where they filmed that. I think I don't know how to find it again, but I think there's some sort of hotel where they filmed that where there's like a lot of stories and the stairs are just like all there's like a central hub room, right? And you can see all the
Yeah,
way up to the skylight, right? And then all rimmed around all of that are all the various floors. And then there's also a central pillar. I think if it's correct, they filmed that building. They just like did a camera pan up and down that building, then did copy paste on the green screen things, and just to make it look like godly and ancient, and then add the three statues of the time wizards, and then the
yeah, no,
elevator
because
car.
I mean it looks just as infinite as time is itself.
Right.
Like and I think that's what they were going for is it was a combination. I think what they were going for, at least from a cinematic perspective, is it was supposed to be the one show perspective of how big this place really is, and two to show to like compare it to like basically the infinity of time. Because I mean, when the camera pan first starts, it almost looks like the elevator shaft is horizontal instead of vertical until it comes all the way down, and then you're like, oh my god, my eyes, they hurt. So again, after that whole elevator sequence, we are then shown what a majority of this episode will be. Or well, when I say majority, I mean like the next 15-ish minutes.
Yeah, we do spend a good chunk of the rest of the episode in this room.
There's
No,
basic the best way I can describe this episode is it's split up into three main chunks. The first chunk is the Renaissance Fair crime. The second chunk is the paperwork, and then the third chunk is the climax. So we are on chunk 2 of 3, that being the paperwork.
oh boy, I love paperwork.
Yep. And so basically, Mobius puts Loki in the files area of the TVA and is like, "Hey, sit down and study every single crime that has taken place." Um, and do your work. All right. He has this pretty funny scene with the files keeper where he's like, "Can I have the file? Can I have access to the files on the timekeepers?" And she's like, "It's classified." "Can I have files pertaining to the sacred timeline?" "It's classified." "What files can I have?" And then it just cuts to her handing him this really thin stack of files, and it just says Loki. Oh yeah, this is also where Loki finds out about the destruction of Asgard and Ragnarok.
Right. This becomes key, I guess. Um, because
Yes.
yeah, when the librarian gives Loki more of his own files, he then turns to the file of, the climax of Thor Ragnarok, the destruction of Asgard, and he becomes emotional again, as we saw.
Yep.
Yeah, which is
It,
did
it,
did he not see the destruction of Asgard in that presentation from last
I
week?
don't. I don't know. From if we are going off of us, if what we saw was all that Loki saw, then all Loki saw during his PowerPoint presentation was the death of his mother, the death of his father, and his death. But he didn't actually see the destruction of Asgard in that PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. So he never got to see your savior is here.
He never got to see that. He never got to see Mark Ruffalo drop onto the Rainbow Bridge and die. Um, but
Big
yeah, so
monster.
we so we get some details on the destruction of Asgard, at least in file
In
form.
file form.
How it is considered a Class 7 apocalypse, total planetary destruction. We actually get the a confirmed amount of casualties, that being 9,719. And we also see that there was a zero time variance
Right,
energy.
like the cinematography here zooms in on particular details of the file, and the big
Yes.
thing to take away from there is the quote zero variance energy detected. What exactly does that mean? Well, Loki tries to describe exactly that in this next scene where he goes to the lunchroom and sees Wilson again and absolutely ruins his salad.
Hold on. I just realized something looking back at this scene.
Huh.
You know how Thor and Korg and stuff, they come up with that code name of the Revengers.
Oh, yeah?
In the shot where where it zooms in on zero variance energy detected, you can see down underneath it's kind of blurry, but it says codename Revengers.
Oh, really? That's fun.
Yeah. Sorry, little callback. Anyways, but yeah, definitely the two main things that you want to take away from this are zero variance energy detected and total planetary destruction. Those are the two things you really need to take away from this. And so
Yes.
that's when Loki has an epiphany. And he goes up to the cafeteria to go talk to Mobius, where he finally has an answer on how to find Cloaky.
Yeah, Loki demonstrates his Nexus theory by absolutely destroying Wilson's lunch.
Yep, he absolutely destroys the salad.
God damn.
I want to know how much of Mobius's lines during this of Loki like messing with the salad. I want to know if any of them were improvised.
That probably like something like that. I don't know how to describe it in acting terms because I'm not an actor, but yeah, there probably had to be some very clever improvisation there.
And so he he demonstrates by using salt, pepper, the salad, and I want to say like one of those like squeezable like juice thing. It's either water or juice.
It looked like a juice
Um,
box.
it did. But I have seen water come in boxes like that, so who knows? It's not Asgard. That's my lunch.
Oh man.
But yeah, so in this metaphor that Loki creates, um, he says that the salad is Asgard, um, and the salt and pepper are anything he wanted to do. Um, so, like, let's say he wanted to throw Hulk off the Rainbow Bridge and then like set fire to the palace. Those are the two examples he uses for the salt and pepper. Well, in this metaphor or in this theory that Loki has, it doesn't matter what he does because in the end, and then this is when the juice box comes in. It doesn't matter because in the end, Surtur would destroy Asgard no matter what. And so as long as that happens, nothing matters, and so the branch doesn't. There's no reason for there to be a branch if no one's there to do anything.
Right, and this would be considered a nexus point, right?
No. So what he's explaining is, so a nexus point is created when something that wasn't supposed to happen happens. So for example, in Loki's case, Loki wasn't supposed to pick up the Tesseract back in 2012 after it got knocked out of 2023 Tony Stark's hand. He wasn't supposed to do that. Therefore, because he wasn't supposed to do that, that cascaded into a whole bunch of other events that weren't supposed to happen if they didn't reset the timeline. Because they reset the timeline, those things didn't happen. But that's what a nexus point is when one thing that wasn't supposed to happen cascades and does a domino effect of causing more and more things that weren't supposed to happen. What he's explaining is how if there is a world-ending event or a cataclysmic event that there are no survivors of, then you could do anything you want in that event as long as no survivors are still there. Because then there's no way for it to cascade out of control. Does that make sense?
Okay, to the point. So it only happens when they're and during cataclysmic events, right? Like saying, I think we were discussing this earlier, of like how, so like we kind of thought there's some sort of like plot hole to the whole Loki 2012 Loki was not supposed to grab the Tesseract, but that also means that Tony and Steve were always meant to go to the 1970s to grab that Tesseract.
Mm-hmm.
So that so theoretically that means you could basically do anything you'd want as long as the result is still the same, right? But that only applies to cataclysmic events. So whatever happened during that time heist is
Yes.
something different.
Um, Essentially, yes. Um, Basically, what it's supposed to be is as long as there's no one around to spin off the timeline. Like, let's say there was an event where there was one survivor. If that one survivor saw something that wasn't supposed to happen, then that one survivor would then do something that he wasn't supposed to do, and so that would cascade. But because there's no survivors, there's no one to witness anything.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense. Okay.
So yeah, so that's how they find out that Cloaky is hiding in some form of cataclysmic event. However, first they have to test this theory.
Right. Okay. But yeah, that makes sense now because I was super confused on how that all played out. But since if the thing is that there are absolutely no survivors, no one, no witnesses at all after the fact of the event to change something within the timeline, it doesn't matter what happens then and there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Um, I also really like this moment between Mobius and Loki. While they're still in the cafeteria after the whole metaphor is over, and Loki says we have to test this theory out properly and like go back to a cataclysmic event just to see what would happen. I like how Mobius is like, no, you've stabbed people in the back like 50 times, and then he's
Right.
like, well, I'm never going to do it again.
Right, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Is like you don't know if Loki is lying right now or not. If he's like truly turning a sort of new leaf here, or if he's just sort of lying. But given that it's episode 2, it's like the one truth that
Yeah,
he did say though is like I don't want to go to Asgard. That's like the one true thing he said, and to test the theory out. So that's why they
yeah,
went to 79 A.D. to the destruction of Pompeii.
yep. Pompeii, Italy, the most devastating volcanic eruption on Earth, or well, one of them. It's one of the most destructive. I mean, it literally erased an entire town from existence.
Exactly. And I'm looking at what AD is. It's Anno Domini. The terms Anno Domini.
So it would also be BCE. Or no, not BCE.
Just BC.
No, it would be 80. No matter what. But this is so because Christianity. 0 is the year Christ was born. So 79 AD would be 79 years after Christ was born.
Right. Which was
Everything before 0 is BC or BCE. BC would be before Christ. BCE would be before Common Era.
okay. Complicated.
So, yeah.
Timey-wimey.
So Pompeii exploded 79 years after the birth of Christ. If Christ was still alive and made it that far, he would have been 79.
After?
Yes.
So that's what AD means? What? Okay, now I'm confused.
I don't know what AD stands for, but I just know that 79 AD is 79 years after Christ's birth. At least I think. Hold on. We got to look up history real quick.
One eternity later.
How did we even get down this rabbit hole?
Because our public school system is garbage and doesn't teach us this crap.
Probably because it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
It does matter. If we want to understand how Western civilization lived, we need to know what happened in the year 1 and 1 BC. Okay, we're done. All right, we're done.
Alrighty, are we continuing on with the rest of the episode?
We are continuing on. Okay, after we've done some research because our public school system is garbaggio. This is the 79th year ever. This isn't 79 years before the birth of Christ. This is 79 years after it. I don't know when we dropped the AD from our calendars because we don't call this year 2021 AD. That just doesn't work. I don't know when we dropped AD, but this is currently year 79. That's when Pompeii fell. Good to know.
Yes.
Holy shit.
So yeah, Loki then starts speaking to everyone, and is just like, "Hey, you're all gonna die. I would know. I'm from the future. Anyways, have fun and die."
Right. I wrote it down as like Loki does shenanigans and tells the people the volcano is about to erupt, and then the volcano erupts, and Loki's theory turns out to be correct.
They find out that Loki is hiding in Doomsdays. And so then they are on the mission to look through all the possible Doomsdays that Loki could be hiding in. They also have kind of a sweet scene that almost makes you think Loki could change for the better. Where Loki
okay, so to slow down. So they after they do that, and then they go back to do some research on apocalypse events in all of time. They take a break from their final research because they're basically crashing at this point. And so this is where Loki and Wilson kind of go into like a theological conversation about like belief and order, chaos, and free will, basically. Cool. So they go into this conversation, and basically this is where I was getting at like last episode, where like the time wizards are kind of this stand-in for God, basically, but in the Protestant sense, where they are not micromanagers, and so Loki is basically asking the question of like the questions of Mobius of like, have you ever had any free will or any wanting of your own to do? And then this is where Wilson Mobius gets into this conversation about this jet ski. It's like he called it. What did he call it, Brian? It's like the jet ski was like the most perfect invention ever made
Yeah, no,
because
he says that it was a beautiful union of form and function. Well, so something that I kind of figured the show was going to dive into was the theme of purpose.
yeah,
Um, because throughout both Loki and Mobius, each of them are going through a little bit of a not necessarily an identity crisis. So Loki is having the whole dilemma of knowing that he had no free will. It was all supposed to happen. And now he has free will here in the TVA. Meanwhile, Mobius has always had free will, but he's always been trapped in the TVA, not really able to do anything that he really wanted to do, like jet ski, for example, because it would create a branch in the timeline. So they're each trying to find their own way.
right. And since under that definition, that would really mean that Wilson doesn't really have any free will, does he? Even though they say
Nope.
because he is in the world of TVA, I guess he technically does, but he doesn't at the same time, because if he were to go out and live freely as he wanted to, like ride on that beautiful jet ski that he loves so much, it would cause a time paradox, basically. And so
Yeah.
we can translate that if we're to go with the God is not a micromanager type of thing. But that would basically constitute that the free will actually doesn't exist. And if despite our actual agency and the lives that we have, we're always destined with some sort of eternal fate that is written for us. We're always ordered. We're always set in an order, and whatever chaos there is to be had, as in chaos, like Loki says, let's say Loki, his chaos was to, oh, I don't know, alien invasion of New York. Basically, it is basically chaos in the sense of the orders being disrupted, but that within itself is ordered under the auspices of the um, non-micromanaged world timeline, or however you want to call it. With that, do you see what I'm getting with that?
Yes.
Yes. And so basically, I wish they hadn't ended that conversation the way they ended it, because they really just end it with the way as like, because earlier Wilson called Loki a scared little boy, and that's just a thing that they come back to is how they end it. But Loki also ends it as like, one thing that I've learned is that good people are never always really good, and bad people aren't always ever really bad. I don't know where that came from, and also I don't know what kind of definition of good and bad that the writers, I don't like, yeah, the writers don't know what they're getting at. Just kind of wish they hadn't ended it off with that. It's just some mealy mouth thing of like, they're it's like good.
It's definitely one of those conversations that I think everyone has had with themselves at some point. The debate over free will versus fate.
Right, exactly.
I mean, hell, I even had that debate in one of my theater classes one year.
Really.
Yeah, no, literally like half of my theater class one time. I think it was theater 3. We had like an entire half a class dedicated to fate versus free will. So, anyways,
Yeah, basically,
onwards.
basically all it really comes down to is like a quote from Cardinal Manning that says like, all human conflict is ultimately theological. Anyway, they ended that conversation off the way they did, but then Wilson remembers like the scared little boy line, that he recollects with. And he remembers the scared little boy from the previous episode in the, what was it, 1549
Yep.
church. So because of that scared little boy, he remembers the chewing gum that he was not supposed to have in that era. And so basically, now he has the chewing gum from in the evidence locker that they have there. So now what they're trying to do is try to connect some sort of apocalypse event in all of time, as well as the same time there's this kablooey chewing gum at the same point. And so they happen to pinpoint the exact location and time of Haven Hills, Alabama, 2050 is where an apocalypse event and the chewy blueberry bubblegum is at. And then they gather up all the Minutemen to brief on the mission, how they're going to get Clokey, etc., etc. Then they finally move into the supermarket in
Yes.
Alabama 20.
Now, really quick. Now, Rock's cart, that was something I was somewhat familiar with. Rox is the prefix of a company called Roxxon that is in the Marvel comics. Roxxon is a very bad, corrupt oil company that is supposed to be a play off of Exxon, the real life oil company. And now Roxxon has actually made a Marvel TV show appearance. That being the not that much talked about and very underrated, in my opinion, Cloak and Dagger TV show.
Clokey.
Cloak and Dagger, Clokey. Cloak and Dagger are two Marvel characters who have worked together to like solve crimes and stuff. They're very lesser known. Cloak has the ability to teleport through shadows, and Dagger has the ability to use light projection to create daggers that she can throw and stuff like that. And in their show, Roxxon was the main villain, and was like the reason why everything happened to them. So that's what I think Roxcart is supposed to be referencing. It's supposed to be referencing like a future where Roxxon basically like bought out Haven Hills, Alabama. Whether or not that's what they're going for, who knows? But I mean, hey, Easter egg.
Yeah, Easter egg at the end of the day.
And so that I just wanted to bring attention to the nice little Easter egg. Yeah, Haven Hills, Alabama, where we see Roxcart in the year 2050. So about 29 years in the future, this is going to be us, apparently.
Oh boy. Well, that's Alabama. We don't have to worry about it unless.
Oh yeah, no, this is Alabama. It's cousin country. We're fine.
Sweet home Alabama.
When you realize it's illegal to mate with your cousin in Alabama.
I forgot my glasses. I was wondering if you could read me this text. Tell me what it says.
Jake, I'm pregnant. What the fuck do we do? I'm your sister.
What do you mean I'm joking? My whole family tree is just a circle.
And here they decide that honestly, this is probably one of the stupidest decisions in this show so far, and that's splitting up Mobius and Loki.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
Because I mean, pretty much this. Like, I mean, obviously, this entire climax had to happen with Loki being separated from Mobius. But honestly, I mean, come on.
Yeah, it was probably the only way the climax could have worked out, and they just had to figure out some way to split the two up.
But yeah. So they go on with their mission with Mobius and a team of his Minutemen going into the warehouse to look for Clokey, while Loki and the head Minuteman goes to find Clokey within the aisles of the store. And then we see through a pan through a security camera that Clokey is watching their every footstep. And then we see a timer counting down from 20 minutes. Again, this show went from 0 to 100 real fast.
It did.
And honestly, the way that this part is shot and stuff, I legit thought I was watching like a horror movie for a good like 5 seconds, because the way that like the lights flicker on and off and stuff. I mean, I know it's during a storm, but still. So what's the name of the head Minuteman?
Her name is Hunter B-15.
Hunter what?
B-15.
B-15. Okay.
Yeah, it's some sort of code thing that they all refer to themselves as. I'm not sure what it
Yeah,
stands for.
they're all given numbers.
Right. So I don't know if throughout the series we'll just naturally call her Hunter or B-15 or something. We're not saying that whole thing.
I think for right now we're just gonna call her B-15.
Alrighty then.
So B-15 and Loki find a random man looking at azaleas because they're half off because of the storm.
It's an apocalypse sale. Come on now.
Yeah. They're like, why aren't you in the warehouse with the others? Because there's a sale on plants.
You ain't gonna survive.
I gotta get my azaleas, man. But no, we soon learn that this was a enchanted man, enchanted by Loki, who then passes the enchantment on to B-15. Clokey then talks through B-15 to talk to Loki. It's really interesting to see Loki talk to an alternate version of himself.
Yeah, it is, especially when it's not like the actual embodiment as of right now. Because it's
Yes.
interesting because like Clokey, as we'll call, takes control of like a lot of people within the supermarket. And so it's interesting to see how each of the actors can portray, I suppose, their own version of Loki, I suppose.
Yeah. It's also very interesting to see how even though they're both using like magic and the same kind of magic, they're using their magic in different ways. For example, Loki plays the illusion kind of thing to make him seem more imposing than he actually is. Meanwhile, Clokey is using more of the enchantment stuff to get people on her side. And so yeah, so then right before their conversation gets juicy, we then cut to Mobius and the other Minutemen looking through the warehouse to see if they can find Clokey and or the hostage from the beginning of the episode, which they do eventually find the hostage Minuteman or Minutewoman in this case, who is traumatized and is just repeating it's real, it's real, it's real over and over again. What's real? Don't know. We'll find out apparently.
Like she's mumbling all the words too, so it's kind of unintelligible to actually hear what she's saying until like
That is why you watch with subtitles.
Oh, that's why. Oh, you.
Because all she's saying over and over again, it's real, it's real, it's real, it's real.
Right, but assuming you're not, it's like it's unintelligible. Like that was probably the point of the scene. So I think you just ruined your experience, Brian, by having the subtitles up.
It still doesn't tell me when someone's speaking French and what they're saying. Okay.
Really? What?
No. Okay. No. So I was surprised when the Loki scene came on of them in Pompeii and him speaking Italian. I legit thought it was just going to say speaks Italian. No, they actually do translate what he says. But there have been some shows where legit it'll just say start like speaking Spanish.
Really?
Yeah.
That's super weird. Okay.
Or there will be like a song playing and it just says music playing and then it gives you like the title but it doesn't actually like translate the words of the song.
Yeah, I've seen those, but I haven't seen the other example.
Loki are talking and Loki basically gives a proposal to Randy saying, "Hey, you join me as my lieutenant," or as the British like to say, lieutenant. Why? Don't know. They just like to be different. And you can help me get to the timekeepers and steal their magic and steal their power. Sound good, Loki?
Right. This is where we finally learned that our Loki's overall objective is to, overthrow the Time Wizards and basically take control of the central timeline, become the micromanager, as if you will. Loki trying to probably wants to get the upper hand of the Time Wizards to make that 200%, 100%, 100%, 200% rather. And so he gives the offer of Cloaky to join him in his excellence of overthrowing them. But Cloaky rejects the offer because they have ulterior motives. And so basically, as we cut back to Mobius and the others of the, I don't know how to describe it. Is basically, like, I guess, weird way to put it, shell shocked. The shell shocked soldier is basically, as she's mumbling all the words to herself, she finally blurts out that she had revealed the location of where the Time Wizards were at. And so that basically segues neatly into Cloaky's main objective is to not overthrow the Time Wizards, is to destroy the Time Wizards, and more importantly, the timeline.
We then get the big reveal that Cloaky is a woman.
A female. Oh no.
So this here's the thing about female Loki, or as the community has deemed Lady Loki. Lady Loki is not a specific Marvel. Well, I mean, she is a specific Marvel character. She's Loki. But there have been alternate versions of her that have appeared. This one, I think, is a original interpretation of the character. Because I mean, the first time a female Loki was introduced, I think, was back in like '96. And that was in. So, here's the funny story. I'm just gonna quickly explain this. So you know how in Thor in Infinity War or not Infinity War Endgame, after that 5-year gap, we learned that there was a new Asgard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, something similar to that happened in the comics, where after the events of Thor Ragnarok, or after the events of Ragnarok, Thor rebuilt Asgard in like Michigan, I think it was. He rebuilt it somewhere in the States. And they had this plan to put their consciousnesses into human bodies. That's a really long story that I'm not going to get into.
Okay.
And Loki caught wind of. So it was originally just supposed to be Thor and his followers 3. You know, Sif the lady, and then the big one and the smart one. It was just supposed to be him and those 3 that were going to switch bodies. But Loki got wind of the idea and then was like, you know what? I'm going to steal the body. And he decided to steal the body that Sif, the lady, was supposed to go into, therefore becoming the first Lady Loki. The other Lady Loki that has appeared was back in like 2010. And that Loki was just Loki pretending to be a girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
there's your history on Lady Loki.
Hold on. Has there ever been a comic interpretation of Loki being ever interacting with Lady Loki?
Possibly. I think in the comic that I just told you about, the one from 2010, I'm pretty sure in that one there are some interactions of Loki interacting with Lady Loki. But other than that, I think that's about as far as it goes.
Okay, just wondered about that. Because it'd be it is interesting to see how, like, you know, 2 different interpretations of a Loki would interact, and I guess that's what we're gonna see in the future.
I think that's also part of the reason why Loki is confirmed to be gender fluid, is because he could, if he wanted to, become a girl.
I don't know how
I don't know exactly how that works, but
I mean, you know, as if probably if you guys haven't seen, audience viewers, some of the promotion stuff that I have on, like, they showed like a thing of Loki's profile, and under the sex category that it's fluid, basically. So basically that would mean you can, how it goes, become a man and a woman whenever you want. It's never really solid. It's just fluid. Now, within the context of the MCU, after seeing this Lady Loki, that would actually make sense. And if that's a thing that's like, the first time we've ever heard it, that would be something interesting. But seeing as we have seen a Lady Loki, that is a woman, a female. A woman is defined as a adult female human. That's the definition. If if gender fluid weren't a thing of a term that was said beforehand, basically what I'm saying is it makes sense within the context and not when anybody else in the broader culture says that they are gender fluid because they can't magically transform into a woman like Loki can in the thing. And remember, Loki, it's fiction. It's all fiction. No, nobody in the real world can rightfully claim that they're gender fluid and just magically transform into a woman. That's not a thing. And that's when Lady
Yep.
Loki just activates all the bombs, and then all the bombs that she's been sealing, the reset charges. And then at first I think Loki thought this too, was like all the charges were going to go off in the superstore itself, but then they all teleport to somewhere, or somewhen rather. And basically, back at the TV HQ, there's this whole monitor just like showing the status of the timeline. It was shown earlier in the episode where there's like this disconnecting red line from the timeline, and then after the reset charges goes off, it resets back into its center line. And right when that happened, I said, that's probably gonna split off into multiple directions in this series. Just wasn't expecting it to be this very episode.
Yeah. So the rest of the episodes of the show could potentially either be a multiverse event happening, or it's the TVA trying to stop all of these from becoming multiple universes. Also, I'm looking here through all the so it's obviously not going to show all of them, but on the monitor that the judge is looking at to see what happened, you can actually see the dates, the times, and the locations of a lot of these bombs. And I'm looking at all of them right now.
Oh, I see.
And here's the list. I'm just going to give the year and the location. But there's 1522 Vietnam, 1492 Portugal, 2301 Vormir, 1551 Thornton, USA, 1999 Cookville, USA, 2004 Asgard, 1390 Rome, 1984 Sakar, 1808 Barichara, 1708 Porvo, 1382 Ego, 1982 Titan, 1947 New York, 1984 Tokyo, 0051 Hala, 1999 Kingsport, 1001 Xandar, and then a couple other countries that are here in. There's Xandar and then one more. So if you didn't catch that, a lot of those are references to other movies.
Really now?
Like Titan being Thanos' home planet, Ego being Star-Lord's father, Sakaar being the planet that Hulk went to in Thor Ragnarok, Vormir, which I believe is one of the 9 realms.
That was that was from Infinity War where Red Skull was vanished too.
Yes, that's right. And then Asgard, which is the home of the gods. So yeah. The Sacred Timeline just got bombed.
No wonder it's slated for a second season.
Yeah. And so Lady Loki then opens one of her time portals, and goes on through. And Loki is about to follow, and then that's when Mobius and the Minutemen are like, Loki,
No,
Loki, wait,
don't
no,
do it.
Loki,
Don't do the obvious thing that you're going to do.
no.
And then he did
And
it
then Loki just jumps on in.
on a cliffhanger. So with that kind of cliffhanger, and now that you've listed all the broken timelines from the monitor that you just read off there, I'm thinking whether the formula of the show is now going to go on to like individual timelines, and where Loki's going to fight off this threat in this certain timeline, the next episode go to the next, and so on and so forth. And might not be the direction because there are only 6 episodes in this season. But then again, this show is also slated for a second season.
Yeah.
So what?
And each episode is about an hour long.
Right. So what do you think, like, given this whole climax of just what just happened right here, where do you think the series will go from here?
At least a majority of these timelines, or a good chunk, I think are going to become multiple universes or nexus points. And so, because I mean, if you remember from the trailers, one of the trailers literally had Loki with a president button, like running for president kind of thing. So, I mean, maybe that's one of the universes that they go to, or something like that. You never know. I mean, hey, if they do lean towards that way, maybe this could potentially tie into Doctor Strange 2. Who knows? Conspiracy theories. Halfway.
Right. We were discussing this a little bit before we started recording. If the show were to somehow divulge its way into Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, I guess the question would be whether given that the time wizards have this whole timeline, they have set rules for the eternal fates and they don't micromanage everything. Would they constitute allowing Doctor Strange and his sect of wizards, I guess, would they constitute their knowledge of the time wizards?
Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, that's a question that's left to be answered. If either this is going to tie into Doctor Strange 2, I don't think it will. But if it just so happens to be, that will be a thing that will have to be brought up.
Mm-hmm.
But alrighty then, that was our review and synopsis podcast of Loki Season 1, Episode 2. Do you have anything else left to add before we close out today?
Oh, no. Do you?
No, that'll be all. We'll just have to see where this cliffhanger
Alrighty.
takes off into next. Alright.
Well, then, I guess this marks the end of episode 2.
Thank you guys for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic night. Make sure that you watch Loki streaming every Wednesdays on Disney Plus before watching our podcast episodes, and make sure to subscribe to our channel so you can keep up to date with all of our Loki Season 1 reviewing and impressions podcasts. Alright. Thank you guys for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic night, and take care, everyone.
Thanks for visiting the TVA. Don't hesitate to let us know how we're doing.